Yeah. I've got a few chapters that I thought we could touch on, and there's one that I was hoping we could maybe spend a bit of time on, and it's die on your journey. I
Mm-hmm.
love this, like many people, this idea of the journey or the path, whatever it may be. But you say you can't go on a real journey without detours. Could you say more, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you picked up on this because it was one of my real strong realizations as I was writing the book. At first, I thought, well, I'll just have chapter, 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 chapter. But then I was like, I want some other stuff thrown in here, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. Then I realized I was always wanting to go on a little detour, um, and it occurred to me that is just what any journey is like. I mean, I think when we reflect back on great journeys that we've gone on, either vacations or sometimes journeys that we didn't so much choose or just had to go on, we realized that some of the most interesting parts weren't the things that were on the plan, but that where we were called off of the plan or forced off of the plan a bit onto a detour, but then saw things that we might not have otherwise seen. So I just think that that's true, that good journeys are in a way almost occasions for detours. And I think a good traveler, or maybe just a good traveler of life, is someone who's willing to go on detours when they present themselves, and not just be irritated by them, but be kind of open to what they have to offer. But I also I sometimes am, or in fact I should say I'm frequently disturbed by the fact that our culture can sometimes want to eliminate all detours, so to speak. That one version of tourism, for instance, is just a kind of efficient, straight bus trip to a place where you can get a selfie and then back to the hotel. And in a way, you've missed out on what it means to travel if you do that. But the same can go with say education. I worry that sometimes students are conditioned to want to think, or institutions almost compel them to think that they just need to take courses that are relevant to their major, that will then add up to a degree that will then lead them to a job that will do it. It's like it's boom, 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 boom. You're just supposed to do that. Well, but as I think most of us who've had a good education understand, like things that you didn't expect to be important were sometimes the most valuable things that you ended up learning. And so to me, on an educational path, I want it's not to say that there isn't a path, but to say that you want to have some flexibility where there's openings to detours. And sometimes those detours end up taking us to the most important places.
It's beautiful. It's makes me think of this little hole in the wall restaurant that we ate when we were in Rome. Some little place that doesn't look like much, no one there. You weren't planning on going, and you happen to it would catch your eye, and some of the most amazing food that you could possibly, put in your mouth. It's a fascinating.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing of the like rigidity. If you look at like the psychological research, it's all about being adaptable and being, flexible, and being rigid is a bit of a problem. But like, as you talk about in terms of some of the systems, as we're navigating the world, maybe it's in the way of degrees and courses where it wants to maybe perceive that being rigid is the actual way. But I love how you talk about, the journey. It is the detours. That's the wonder, the beauty. It's like you can miss out with too much rigidity.
Yeah, and I guess another way of putting it is that it's important to be open to surprise. So much of what does end up moving us takes us by surprise, and so if all we're looking for is our goal, then sometimes we shut ourselves down to those surprises.
Yeah, for sure. There's another chapter, Dare to Be Wise, that I had to go directly to. I bounced all over the book. But you talk about one figure who lays out the good life and lives up to it. Could you speak a bit about Horace?
Yeah. So Horace is one of the great Roman poets, and I just find his poems to be some of the most humane and reasonable and beautiful expressions of what it means to live well. He's a poet. He's kind of a philosopher too. I don't think what label one gives him is all that important. One of the things that I actually like about the tradition of Roman philosophy is that it itself is eclectic. It's sometimes in poetry, sometimes in letters, sometimes in different forms. But anyway, yeah, Horace. If people know one line of Roman poetry, it's likely a line from Horace, "Carpe diem," which is usually translated as "seize the day." I like to translate it as "reap the day," because to me, what Horace shows us is that seizing the day doesn't just mean going wild or checking off stuff on a bucket list, but rather it is kind of paying loving attention to the world, cultivating relationships with other people, enjoying good food, having a glass of wine, having a sense of humor. Horace draws on some of the Stoic traditions in philosophy that were important in Rome. The sense of most of life can't be controlled, so you should try not to worry about that and focus on those things that you do have power to do. But he also draws on the Epicurean tradition that really likes the idea of savoring pleasures in a moderate form, or at least not in a crazy form. And so he takes, I think, what's reasonable in many different philosophical traditions and finds a really beautiful way of embodying in his life. And to me, he contains this dynamic that we see in actually a lot of Roman philosophy, which is a dynamic between, on the one hand, reflecting on death. The famous expression in Latin is memento mori, remember you will die, and then connecting it to this idea of carpe diem, that reflecting on death is not a macabre or depressing thing. It's a way to remember to live. It's a way of remembering that we should really savor the time that we have, really reap the day, make the most of it. The other thing that I really like about Horace is, I think, embodied in the actual art of his poetry, that I think he found the work that he was meant to do and did it really, really well. He's quite clear that he's not going to be some grandiose poet in the way his friend Virgil was, who wrote one of the great epics of the Western tradition, or he's not going to write super passionate kinds of poems like some other Roman and Greek poets did, but that he's going to find the things that he can do really well and really perfect them. And to me, that's a great lesson about when you can find the work that is given that you're cut out to do, and then you do that to the highest possible standards, you make something that is I think, well, you engage in a making process that I think is a deep part of what the good life involves.